Hello. Here we are again with Mookie Tenembaum. We are exploring through these videos his philosophy, his disillusionist theory, his misalgic theory. And what we are doing now, as you know, is not trying to define abstract concepts as we did in the beginning, but rather asking him to analyze for us from his philosophical point of view reality as it unfolds. We are sort of going along with the news. We are now late October 2020 amidst the COVID-19 pandemic almost all over the world. And last week we started analyzing the loss of credibility national states are enduring. These illusions that were paramount in what we used to think was our way of life are now threatened. And we started with that a week ago, and we are going to ask Mookie again this week to give us his philosophical outtake on the loss of credibility national states are now experiencing during the pandemic.
Well, what we are going to talk about exactly is how illusions are being fading away. The state illusion. Last week, what we spoke about is that democracy is not equipped to deal with the pandemic. It's not. I mean, I'm not saying it happily. I'm just stating a fact. Why? Because we have the different branches of government, as in any democracy, and almost all of the countries are democracies. China, Vietnam are not, and they are a special case. We'll talk about it. We talked about that. We'll talk about it again. But basically, the states, the judicial branch, and the executive branch, and the legislative branch. That means the president in the U.S. and Congress and the courts, on the federal courts, and on other countries is prime minister and parliaments. But we're talking about all the same. They're all really behaving like the Three Stooges. I mean, it's nothing is happening well. Every time somebody wants to do something, and I said that a judge changes the rules, or a committee in Congress or in Parliament decide different things, and it doesn't matter what the scientist says. They have to be rehashed and hashed and rehashed again until they make a decision. And of course, by then the virus have gone miles and miles into its never stopping, I would say, marching into our lives. Yes, we are being marched through us. So we spoke about that. I talked about the Alamo, the last place where the government can, the illusion of the state can show it exists. Is through the Fed in the US or the central banks. That means printing money. And printing money, how much? As much as it takes. That's what the Fed says, and that's what the European central bank said, and the Japanese bank, whatever it takes. So they can print unlimited amount of money because they don't even have to print it. They just push a button. So that was it. And the only thing that does do is trying to keep everything in its place until a vaccine or a miracle or both happens and the pandemic is gone. What today we're going to talk about is that basically what will happen if the state cannot respond, if this breaks down. So the first thing I want to go is to the Middle Ages. Why am I going to the Middle Ages? Is because in the Middle Ages, there were no states. They were really little villages or towns who were very independent, and the states were very weak or non-existent. Who had all the power during the Middle Ages? The church. The church was it was the superpower. It was not, and I want to be very clear, it was not God, because of course there is no God, but the church itself was the only power, the only illusion working. And I have to say that by then, at those times, The church was two things: was as a religion and as a state in some way, yeah, as a supra state on top of all of us. We have seen states gone disappearing. The Soviet Union, I said that the last time, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, and I can continue to go on and on and on. Many countries disappeared, but immediately another country, immediately, I mean the next day, another country took its place. There is no vacuum, no such thing as vacuum. There is no place on earth that a state is not controlling, no, maybe only the seas, and that's also quite limited now, seeing China's behavior. So what we have today is, so those states, the problem is that now there will be no state waiting on the side, because all of the states, or almost all of the states, have been defeated. Politicians, and I want to explain what happens. You see, a politician is a person whose education, whose only aim, whatever he does from the moment he wakes up until he dies, he goes to sleep, is negotiate. He knows only one thing: negotiation. Democracy means to negotiate. Everybody negotiates with everybody all the time. Even the contracts, everything is negotiated. So lawyers, politicians, they are, in general, they have the same profession, so they negotiate. The virus is not a negotiable thing. We need here a scientist, not a politician. The politician is exactly the opposite. So politicians not only have failed, they will fail. They will continue to fail, because it's not something you learn while you do the work. Yes, this you need really a scientist. I even want to, I realized, you see how the scientists dress? I'm not talking Fauci, who dresses quite well. Most of the scientists dress quite liberally, especially in Europe and in other countries. They dressed, with a very shirt or t-shirt or something like that. Politicians, no, they have a tie. They're very well dressed. Even when they don't have a tie, they don't have a tie. It's not. So even in the clothing is different between the two. Yes, and of course we are in the hands of politicians. So this is going to fail. Where it's not failing? China and Vietnam. Why it's not failing in China and Vietnam, Florencio? Because China and Vietnam are dictatorships, and they control two things, not just one. The first thing they control is if you go out without a face mask, or if you don't do exactly what the government tells, you go to prison in the best of cases. Other cases, something else could happen to you. But basically, it's that. So they all very well behave. The second thing is they control the information. The Chinese control the information. That means even if there is COVID, you don't know about it. And if you don't know about it, you don't suffer. So this is the two advantages they have. So I'm going back to the story of the Middle Ages. Okay, so if we go into the Middle Ages again, if the state is going to disappear, that means there will be no illusions. Are we all going to be disillusions? No, absolutely no. Illusions always, once an illusion leaves, goes, a new one comes immediately, like the box of tissues with the sufferings. If there is one, but it doesn't have to be the same kind of illusion. It could be a Chinese kind of state instead of democratic state. That could be one. But now, who is going to be the church? If we are going to Middle Ages, we understand your municipality, the city of New York, or that maybe even too big. Yes, the west. The west side's the part of Manhattan, maybe the new power, but who is going to be on top of them? Well, I have you know who? Facebook, Twitter, Google, Amazon, the only global companies that exist. This week, the United States of America, the federal government decided to sue Google to dismantle it, basically. What they want to do is what they did in the past with the Bell company, the phone company. They divided it in 5 pieces, and then they competed with each other, and of course prices went down and new companies came in, and we all know today to talk over the phone costs zero, nothing, has no value. By then, any call, you paid a lot of money. So they are a monopoly, yes? Google is a monopoly on searches. Facebook has a monopoly on And when I mean monopoly, I don't mean they are the only ones. I mean basically they are the only ones. Yes. First of all, what do you think about this till now?
I have a couple of questions to ask you. First and foremost, as you describe this transition out of national states, out of democratic national states as our main illusions, and into maybe more authoritative states, as we see in China and Vietnam, maybe to a medieval scheme in which we have not feudal lords, but local power, and then global corporations in the place of churches and religion. Do you think this transition, this loss of credibility these illusions are enduring, has something to do with time? Because as you spoke, I had the feeling that they were so slow in dealing with the kind of problems we have today. I don't mean only the pandemic, which of course they are incredibly slow in dealing with what happens, but in general, technological challenges, local challenges seems to go at a pace, at a rhythm democratic national states simply can't cope with. So that is one question. To what do you attribute this failure we are seeing that might be the cause for their demise? And if there's no chance for us to live without an illusion, to do without an illusion once the national states fades, do we necessarily have to fall back to sort of feudal local authorities, authoritative governments, corporations, or can we live disillusioned for a while at least?
Let me reiterate what I said. No, you cannot live without an illusion. Once an illusion is gone, the next one will come in. It doesn't have to be the same kind of illusion. It doesn't have to be a state for a state. As I said, it could be the state, and after that could be Google, yes, or not Google, or could be something else. The states are now fighting their last fight. This is the Stalingrad of all the states. It is Google. It is Facebook. Look, I want you to understand what's happening. This is first of all I would say the disintegration, the way the illusions are breaking. They began breaking at some point a little bit of couple of years before COVID, and that's when the freedom of speech that existed in the US. Exists in the US and exists in Canada and in the rest of the countries started to losing its appeal. Government started to limit it. Now you cannot say something anti-Semitic in the street. You cannot laugh at somebody for being gay, for being trans, for being fat, for being. I can go to the list. The list is immense. So suddenly you call the police because he just called me something. And the police will come and pick them up. In fact, they will come faster than if you're being nice. You're being stabbed by somebody. Mm-hmm. So that happened in London. But in every country, I mean, England was like really a fortress of the freedom of speech. France, in every those countries now, hate speech is forbidden. You go to prison. 2 countries remain. That's all I would say. One basically is the US. Now, what happened in the US? The US, you cannot limit everybody's speech, whatever it is, even if he calls for, unless he's calling for immediate violence on somebody, anything is fine. If he says we should go back to slavery and bring all the black people back to slavery, that's legal in the US. That's not legal in other countries, but in the US it's legal. Legal, it doesn't matter. Facebook came in, and a couple of years ago, it began censor the posts. Today, there are a lot of things that if Facebook doesn't like or Twitter doesn't like, they're gone. They say if it's hate speech, if it's denying the Holocaust, if it is saying fake news, if it means being anti-vax. And I want to be clear, yes, I think anti-vax people are people who need to see a psychiatrist. Okay, that's how I see anti-vax. Okay, they're totally idiots. I'm being very clear. But one thing is to do one thing, and the other one is not to let them talk. They can speak, of course, in their home, or if they shout from their balcony. If you are out of Facebook, you are out of the world. You don't have a society. And think about it. We are not, almost all of us now, stuck at home. And if we're not stuck at home, we almost are. Because we cannot see old people, we cannot see this one, we cannot go into closed places. The limits of our social life are huge. The only social life we may have now is Facebook and Twitter. If in Facebook and Twitter we cannot say what we think, that's it. We can only shout at the shower. I mean, while we shower, there is nobody else who will listen. These people have taken over our rights, and nobody is doing anything about it. Well, did anything about it. Now came the state, and it understood that the Facebook of the world, yes, and the Googles of the world and the Amazon of the world are a danger to itself. Of course, since the illusions, they are illusions, not themselves. It's just they, the players, the politicians, those guys who are totally useless in fighting the pandemic, they will try to fight with what they know, those companies. So here's where we are now. And it will very much depend on the judicial branch if the people in the judicial branch will understand that if Facebook wins or Google wins, they lose their job. Everybody loses their job. Everything goes down, becomes or very local or very Google. One thing we talked last week, I think you remember, Florencio, we talked about the central banks. By pushing buttons, they create as much money as they need. Facebook came up with an idea about a year ago about Libra. Libra was a currency they will issue. They were stopped. And now they are going to be very stopped, because the moment they have a currency, you don't need a state. Facebook will give you the money. Facebook will give you as many Libras as you want. Why do you need the bank? Since the bank anyway is issuing currency not on an economic basis, not because behind it there is wheat or meat or gold or an industry. They just do it. So why not Facebook do it? And remember, Facebook connects you with everybody else. Now, not only you will have to be in Facebook and you use the money, you will have to shut up and use their money. What's the difference between that and China? I want to understand. In China, you cannot say whatever you want. And the government takes care of things and takes care. The only thing is, will Google be able to stop the pandemic? They will need AstraZeneca for that, probably. Or I'm just naming a company, yes? One of the big pharma. I would be surprised that Google will buy one of the companies of big pharma. I wouldn't be surprised, but we're not talking about that. Florencio, what is your opinion about all this?
Not an opinion, but a question that I think will take you back to Disillusionism 101, but I want to hear it from you. Why is it that we need illusions to go by? Why is it that, be them national states, democratic authority, local government, churches, global corporations, why can't we do without them?
That means we have to go back to the beginning of misalgia. Remember, all we do in life is try not to suffer. Okay, the best way we have found not to suffer is to sleep, but we cannot sleep all the time because we have to eat, and if we sleep, we cannot eat. Not only because we don't have time to eat, but because we don't have money to eat. Yes, so what we do is we sleepwalk. Let me remind you what sleepwalking. Sleepwalking is the thing we do, the list of habits that are linked one with each other, triggering one each other, yes, into a long day in which only 20 minutes per day in aggregate, we are out of sleepwalking. We are on an intentional mode. So we need to be able to sleepwalk. We need things to be able to ignore things. Okay, it's the power to ignore. I can ignore taking care of my health, or finding myself how to if I need a doctor, money for the doctor, because the state will take care of it. I will not be where I will walk on a sidewalk without being afraid that some guy will go on the car and just drive over me and kill me. Yes, or that somebody will come and rob me, or that my garbage will be taken, although the garbage is not really the state, it's mostly your municipality, your local authorities, but which is important. But basically, we need the state, we need an illusion, every illusion, to ignore things. So the religion, we ignore our death, we ignore the problems, we ignore the necessity of having an ethical point of view. And the family, of course, the family allows me to ignore the necessity, the need for somebody when I will be in trouble. Yes, forget about this, the emotional part that a family means. That has nothing to do with the illusion of the family. But I have a son, so I have now an obligation. But on the other hand, I have rights. All kinds of rights and obligations, they're all set in stone. I don't have to think. I can sleepwalk, thus I will not suffer. An illusion is not, when I call this illusionism, I don't mean people should stop using the illusions. It means to know that it is an illusion. That's all. There is no, I'm not trying to break anything. They break by themselves. That happens. It's Darwinism. They keep disappearing and appearing new ones.
Others take their place.
We need the illusions. We need them. And Google is one. Facebook is one. I'll remind you, yes. Corporations are. AstraZeneca is one. Your vaccine, the concept of the vaccine, is an illusion in itself. Money. Money is an illusion. Once money has lost we said about it, loses its credibility, the state is gone, the mouth together with the money, everything is gone. But we will find something else to do. In Argentina, there is a story during the end of the 20th century. Argentina went into a terrible crisis. And it was so bad that the money was worth nothing. So people, municipalities, local governments started printing their own money. And there were currencies and people were using it. Or people went into barter. As I say, even if money disappears, we will not starve. We will solve it. But an illusion allows us not to think about those eventualities to which we will have to be exposed sooner or later with this COVID experience that we are experiencing now.
Very interesting. We'll carry on with this analysis. Thank you very much.
Well, not with this one, yes. This analysis has been
other illusions.
Yes, this is.
We are done with states.
Part 2 and final part.
If you enjoyed the video, please like it, comment and subscribe.